WRUU 107.5 FM, Savannah, Georgia. WRUU.org. We are Savannah sounding radio with global soul. Yes, dear Drumfolk, freedom is the heart to make revolution, and thank you for joining our liberation ceremonies. Mission statement for which way Savannah, you ask? A, to complicate, challenge, syncopate, dismantle, contrast, dissect, and break regularly adjusted narratives, and to suggest and demonstrate that accepted or expected neutrality reproduces unequal power flows. B, to provide multiple long-range alternatives which have well-researched, relatable, and useful knowledge benefits ordinarily excluded from adjusted power flows. 2, assert consistent, serialized, and unapologetic countervailing narratives as normal practice to indeed polyriddim. C, in the spirit of Yalpin and Buna, the native and African indigenous customs of powerful discourse and dialogue accompanied by medicinal tea and coffee and social therapy. D, it is with this questioning spirit and thought world that we will discover why Juneteenth is not the same as Stoneham commemoration, why the 4th of July can never be like the 5th of July remembrance, why 1619, the New York Times Project, pales in comparison to 1526 insurrection, and generally why freedom is the heart to make revolution. Live, here we go. Hello, this is Dr. David Pleasant presenting Which Way Savannah, Kanapaha theme of the month, thoughts on white trash, justice, and just us. And now to the Kanapaha. This Kanapaha segment is from an upcoming book by Dr. David Pleasant, part of his monologue writing quest on the escape, rebellion, and freedom legacies and early African-American Gullah Geechee experience. Thoughts on white trash, justice, and just us. The following writing reflects upon a talk by Nancy Eisenberg, author of White Trash, 2021. It is also a critique of present historiographies which use the term complicated or complex to flatten, muddle, and extinguish would-be relevant historic dimension. The phrase white trash, as suggested by Eisenberg, came into active use in the 1820s and remains in use so as to characterize segments of poor or underclass white communities. Before the 1820s, figures such as Voltaire, Ben Franklin, J.J. Winkleman had done much to codify human value categories ranked by color and look. Franklin in particular framed the caste perspective on whites which outrightly designated high to low ordering for the group. By his estimation, and in direct contrast to Vatican art historian J.J. Winkleman, Anglo-Saxons were prime white stock. Swarthy Germanic people of Winkleman's heritage were closer to the tawny Negro. Germans were swarthy and unwelcome immigrants, not completely white, not to be trusting, so Franklin thought. Winkleman, alternately in his 1770s writings, valorized Nordic whiteness, idealized ancient Greeks and Romans, but horribly derided Anglo-Saxons. Like eggs in a carton, these grades of human flesh did much to situate perspectives of worth and value in the actual flesh of all human beings. The ramifications for African and Native people, considered homunculi, that is less than human, and despite Ben Franklin's lofty historiographic position as a scientific liberal, those situations are in the record. The implication of some white trash evaluation is that either indenture or political asymmetry among whites creates a flattened assessment of American experience for all. We are all in it together, all the same, except for the rich. This view wrongly assumes that chattel slavery and genocidal land dispossession might be comparable with indenture or caste poverty, and that eugenics classifications ensconced in both constitutional and scientific institutions somehow do not matter. Poor whites certainly were not afforded the entitlements of wealthy oligarchs and landowners. They were definitely deprived of meaningful power in the hierarchical structures of modern society. They were deemed rubbish, crackers, hillbillies, clay eaters, dog meat, rednecks, yokels, and white trash, to be sure, but lesser than and unfit among whites. To be fair, however, many white trash designates and others also outrightly refuse to enable wealthy oligarchs and antebellum, Confederate, or post-Civil War enterprises and colonial ones. Incidents such as the Ogeechee Uprising and other forms of insurrection with Maroons and Seminoles saw them to well join with blacks and Native people in counter-colonial campaigns against both the wealthy and hierarchical whiteness imperatives of the time. Their intolerance for forms of oligarchic hegemony did not add to their favorable description by white elites, but it did cement their autonomy as enabled sovereign human beings. Yet who manned the guns, sniper posts, turrets, lynch mobs, Klan ceremonies, lynch rope, shop floors, suburbs, and etc., where people of color, rich or poor, mainly African and Native people, were bluntly and violently repelled by white men and women? There were not enough oligarchs to do that job. The complex question, however, does not situate an inherent enmity as much as it interrogates a vital presence of station, as well as an enticement of white, which is an aspiration of fulfillment, like being free white and 21 might guide multiple causalities of enmity, separation, pain, murder, exclusivity, and degradation, particularly upon those fixed into lesser categories of humanity or fixed in the status of non-humans, like objects or property. In order to better understand the unfolding asymmetry made neutral by those terms, such as complicated or complex, and especially penetrating analysis is necessary. People in organizations such as the Black Panther Party, Fred Hampton, Malcolm X, and civil rights groups advocated strongly for coalitions which might destabilize the enticement of white. A theme of human rights and civil rights effort was the only chains we can stand are the chains of hand in hand. Up to this point in history, however, only moderate successes can be seen towards an overall transformation through structure. Significant surface level representations have been more likely to supplant meaningful alterations of cemented policy, such as diversity and inclusion performance in the wake of mass incarceration, wealth gap, real estate gap, health gap, death by cop gap, death penalty skews, education gaps, and etc. Each category exposes an inherent failure. The failure exists as empty identity renaming without much needed critical heft. The recognized complexities and complications preserve no more meaningful resource for transformation now in the present than they had in the past. The problems still remain. New names are not, renaming are not. We know the classification and station white trash, but what is the nature of the enticement to whiteness as an elevated posture? What makes the enticement so compelling that it might override other logical, ethical, moral, or spiritual standards? Is it that much different than the head Negro in charge dividends which compelled the black driver or patroon, the task system rewarded slave, the paid off ghetto COINTELPRO informer, the indigenous colonial collaborator, black slave owners, or even the benefits given to white plantation mistress enablers? Alexis de Tocqueville, celebrated writer and Enlightenment zealot from France, 1831, on his visits to America to codify the successes of democracy and equality, said of the early republic, specifically of the whites, "They are taught from infancy to combat want and to place wealth above all the pleasures of the intellect or the heart. The imagination is extinguished by the trivial details of life, and the ideas become less numerous and less general, but far more practical, clearer, and more precise. As prosperity is the sole aim of exertion, it is excellently well attained. I know of no country, indeed, where the love of money has taken stronger hold on the affections of men and where the profounder contempt is expressed for the theory of the permanent equality of property." That's Alexis de Tocqueville back in 1831. He also remarked, startlingly, "The Negro makes 1,000 fruitless efforts to insinuate himself among men who repulse him. He conforms to the taste of his oppressors, adopts their opinions and hopes by imitating them to form a part of their community. Having been told from infancy that his race is naturally inferior to that of the whites, he assents to the proposition and is ashamed of his own nature. In each of his features, he discovers a trace of slavery, and if it were in his power, he would willingly rid himself of everything that makes him what he is. Alexis de Tocqueville, 1831, again. Question: in interrogations of the fitness of an identified stock versus the questionable humanity of certain groups, can we learn to better identify the nuanced languages, practices, and outlooks which so transparently submit ongoing discriminatory policy and division today? When does docility or inaction or satisfaction of neutral place enable adjusted power constructions, representations, and branding? Like how we live now. In examinations of Jim Crow, that the social or political juridical construct, as well as Jim Crow, the performance, production, and entertainment phenomenon, the roots of distinction in either the white-white dilemma, the black-white dilemma, or the black-black head Negro in charge dilemma might have a resource for framing. All of them might be expressed in terms of a kind of one-up positioning. No matter what, at least I'm better than, or I'm better than him, or that, or them. That's like blackface Jim Crow. You have a caricature of someone degraded you can poke fun at and show that you're better than them. You stand on them. No matter what, you're never that low. Competition and elevation of one form or another seems to provide fodder for propaganda which relieves feelings of inadequacy by serializing the ineptitude, mockery, and failure of the Jim Crow blackface character as a composite caricature, a point-to subject to identify, define, lampoon, isolate, and possibly exterminate. A type of catharsis, a freeing from presumed failure happens. As de Tocqueville suggests, stature through consumerism and money may be the only out. The signature of adequacy or quality might exist as color or closeness to white, wealth or fame, all of which have money or gain as an endpoint. Be it the black driver, plantation mistress, white plantation mistress, black slave owner, patroon, white overseer, paid task worker, task system worker, or etc. Things outside of actual human quality of value or sovereignty are the things that are used to frame worth, money and things, or arbitrary designations put on by someone who would sell someone else or sell someone else's labor. How might refreshed assessments and recollections of African presence provide pushback on caricature and characterization which ordinarily reproduce established hierarchies and assumptions? For example, the vantage point for Africans in America is slavery, slaves, plantations, and subjugation, a characterization and type of caricature alive and well today, to this very day. Slaves are captured in the bottom of the boat, may be the only revived thing, or they may be only revived in their humanity if gentrified by money or monarchy or African king symbology, a certain kind of dress or celebrity. Those are the only things that can raise their stock. Their humanity is just human beings, ecological, ecocultural beings. As African people or native people, doesn't matter. It has to have something signified, placed on it to give it value. In contrast, new assessments and new recollections about baseline human worth might place ethical standards such as integrity, morality, justice, liberty, intellect, and so forth ahead of gain, color, elevation of others, camaraderie, or pedigree in a way which challenges accepted reflexes about order, in this case, a frame for humanity which almost exclusively situates Africans as subjugates, victims, property, or near humans, irredeemable, even if repainted with suitable modifiers, like de Tocqueville was talking about. In the case for whites, white trash even, or whites who are elite, pedigrees and things already insulate them from that category of otherness or blackness or a person of Native American descent. No matter what, they are, like the Jim Crow character, always positioned in a better than category. For the last category, suitable modifiers, white trash has an automatic elevation which it might enjoy. That is free, white, and 21. Free, white, and 21 has no commensurable language for either black or red people. have an example. For example, the tour bus advertisement for the Owen Thomas House in Savannah, a slave mansion, has "It's Complicated" being the theme, with a tidy slave quarters spotlighted as an acknowledgement and qualifier of African presence in the region. A neat slave room depicting the presumed story of the slave as an equal and relevant adjunct to the regular colonial, antebellum, or Confederate historical treatments decorates the tail end of tour buses in Savannah. Whites of the mansion and city are framed as oligarchs, masters, doers, thinkers, protagonists, and etc. White trash might then be thought of as an over-there whiteness, lesser fit and ne'er-do-well. Unlike the elite whites, they don't own mansions or grand estates, but they're still better than the slave. For the sake of contrast, why not a scene of open rebellion with a thrashing of masters, their mansions, and a burning of plantations from true events with the "It's Complicated" and premature? Why not an elevation of liberty, justice, equality, and freedom seeking Africans claiming their right, no different than that of the patriots of the Revolutionary War, to be free of subjugation? Why not a behind the scenes fleshing out the chattel enslavement damages, which are not qualified by a tidy, not so bad slave quarters? Why couldn't that be fitted on the back of a bus with "It's Complicated"? Obviously, blacks in self-emancipatory insurrection, not resistance, insurrection, rebellion, or revolution action represents a frightening, harsh, violent, yet true recollection. But why does that violence not equate with the systemic, monetized, and lawfully tolerated violence of chattel slavery, good master or bad master plantation, in the field or mansion slave quarters, in the old human traffic, patroon on the canals task system, semi-freedom, or in prisons of today? Why isn't that violence equivalent? A challenge to the industries of enslavement as overarching terrors, as opposed to the selective privatized interests. That is, where a good or bad master makes the difference. The discourse is regurgitated in cities like Savannah. Or, as with numerous depictions of Revolutionary War patriot heroes thrashing their way to entitled liberty, sitting atop lofty monuments proudly astride railing horses, why not also juxtapositions of African or Seminole people bravely defending their rights to liberty? Why do African people or Native people have to be thrashed, choked, or murdered in order to prove a case for immediate concerns about genuine liberty? Why does a torture or violence index have to be fulfilled first? How does the context or content of freedom agency so suddenly shift when the agents of the inalienable liberty change hue? When they're a different color, everything changes. Does the insurrection example situate a class dynamic for whiteness palatable for either a mixed class, rich or poor, white traveling leisure clientele? Do poor or rich whites need a victim index to validate their entitlement to liberty? Do places like the Baobab Lounge, like at Savannah Plantation Marriott, situate a similar circumstance with Africans hanging up on the wall as decorations along with stuffed animal carcasses, a site of pleasurable drinking and eating near traveling leisure nirvana in this city? The suggestion that the Tocqueville frames promotes a notion of black and red presence, which amplifies a class and race dynamic. Certain groups, however, do not wholly fit with organizations of class, kind, or type. They're not situated as subjects in a struggle for competitive commerce and status, even defined by wealth, but rather are fixed in a station as objects below the category of human. In this respect, connotative narratives, materials, and or cognitive designations about them might only reproduce order, no matter how variegated, which merely amplifies the same overarching assumptions. Slavery, rather than a situation people are forced into, is set up as a manifestation of what those people are and might remain. They are subsequently framed, viewed, and evaluated through a lens of enslavement, objects of disempowerment and servitude, service and instrumentality as a means to an end, service industry and demographic skew as present manifestations. They are framed as objects used for practical purposes to achieve practical and logical gain to be distributed among a certain gated economy and including presumed contributions which otherwise exist as exploited appropriations, knowledge, labor, or intellectual property capitalized for another's wealth and benefit. This includes pretty and saleable art, which situates an aesthetic smorgasbord of symbols, flavors, and colors without any contextual or thematic grounding in inalienable liberty. Of white trash, the Americans as a group were viewed as the white trash of the English. The English were seen by the American as enslavers of their bodies, outlooks, and interests. That enslavement was an aggression of both caste and class. The insurrection, rebellion of white trash mongrel Americans against the elite white Europeans was intolerable to the white Europeans. The presumed enslavement of the white trash Americans by the English was intolerable to white trash Americans. From the point of the American response to that threat, all acts, practices, and projections of patriotism, freedom, liberty, pride, counter-enslavement, and humanity signify not only their multi-ethnic Americanness, but also their entitlement as full human beings. Win, lose, or draw, that assertion, either in a lost war, lost cause, or lost battle, establish both their heritage and humanity, be they aristocrat or white trash. Revolutionary troops, particularly of the South, were paid and confiscated lands of native people and enslaved, which might be translated into clout and elevation, true for either patriarch, oligarch, or white trash. Rumination about captivity, subjugation, victimization, or appropriated contributions to English power did not and does not automatically centralize all claims about the Americans or perspectives on them. Defiance of captivity, subjugation, or victimization, however, does. Slavery, rather than having framed their humanity, coming from the English, or presence, merely sets the tone of their unflinching resources to claim power through their freedom liberation. Win, lose, or draw. White aristocrats, oligarchs, or white trash have been heirs to that certitude and to post-revolutionary war benefits. Apostates were and are scorned. Traitors are scorned. Such certitude is not a side story or a flat factoid. It's primary. Wars rarely involve an entire population. The non-combatant population might, however, be championed by and through those who sacrifice and serve. Those few are commonly acknowledged or rewarded in some way by the non-combatant community. Along with that, the ideals of their struggle are usually shared in and by that community. The community typically does not highlight, extol, or celebrate the context of its slavery, its subjugation, or deprivation as an index before first frontally asserting its entitlement to agency for liberty. The countervailing narratives of both African and Native people as assertions of humanity through a win, lose, or draw liberation ethos are composed of no less a massive inheritance. Liberation, dividends, and power. Nothing trumps the truth of genuine freedom and liberty hoped for, fought for, and attained, not merely as ground won, but as a stalwart assertion and demand of qualitative human agency and everywhere, always and always power, spiritual, philosophical, ethical, cultural, and communal. Liberation. From that point of appreciation and acknowledgement, there might unfold refreshed vision and certitude which defines both a present and future of genuinely balanced human agency, where labels on people such as slave, white trash, redskin, and etc. are transformed. Genuine justice in that recollection embraces liberty as an encompassing ethical truth for all. We, rather than holding back truth or holding truth, must burn all the plantations, whether native, African, or white trash designate. Burn the plantations of a certain cognitive enslavement. Freedom is the heart to make revolution.
Bike Walk Savannah offers bicycle education programs for children and adults, including bicycle rodeos. Nationally certified instructors ensure that all education programs are safe, informative, and enjoyable for participants. They also offer customized programs for businesses and other organizations that are seeking to make bicycling and walking part of their employees' wellness programs. More information is available at bikewalksavannah.org.
The Live Oak Public Library System offers local residents access to hundreds of thousands of movies, television programs, albums, audiobooks, ebooks, and digital comic books for free on your streaming television and mobile devices through the Hoopla app. Supported devices include Roku, Fire, Apple TV, iPhone, and Android, among others. The selection is vast. All you'll need is your library card. Find the Hoopla app on your device and more information at liveoakpl.org.
What does it mean when we say that WRUU is a community radio station? It doesn't just mean that we invite the community to create programming, and it doesn't just mean that we are a voice for the community. It also means that we are counting on the community to keep us going, and you are the community. Almost all of our modest budget comes from small annual or monthly donations from listeners like you. You get to enjoy our community-focused programming because many others have stepped forward to do their part. Now do your part by joining our community of listener donors. Go to WRUU.org right now and make a one-time or monthly donation. And thank you for supporting Savannah's community radio station, 107.5 FM.
Today's Yalpin and Buna segment is a meditation upon a theme. Of course, Yalpin, the native people's medicinal tea drink, chosen in ceremony to stimulate brave, candid, and powerful speech about relevant community needs, and Buna, the East African coffee drink in Abol, Tona, and Barak, a ceremony which produces fiery discourse and truth-telling for community benefit, are the foundation of our Yalpin and Buna dialogues. Think on this. To escape is to suggest a pathway, trail, or gateway to where or when freedom, liberty exists. Simply speaking, it is somewhere other than where you currently are. To rebel is both to demand and then establish freedom when and where urgent empowerment and agency manifests itself. In other words, liberty belongs to you, and you create it in the place you command. Freedom, or liberty, is to know an existential circumstance with no spatial or temporal predicates, without either teleology or telemetry, with no beginning or end. The demand and declaration are self-evident. In short, freedom is a quality of consciousness, no matter where you are, and you project it into every place you go. Ecocultural Concepts. This week's guest, Laura Shadley.
We were talking about that river yesterday when I was listening to some of the elders discuss how the damage was done to it. And I'm just waking up to a lot of this knowledge. It's always been there, I'm sure, but I think that's where a lot of us are too. But the river, they were showing us how it was straightening out in some of the areas, and then we were having that discussion yesterday, which reminded me of the straightening out of humanity, like the straightening out of the rivers and why and how the ways the water is not allowed to do what it's supposed to be doing, the way it's cutting off the growth of the reeds and the other water plants next to the river. And they were showing us, they were explaining all that as he was flying the drone over the river. It just kind of reminded me a lot of like where we are as a human race, especially in more so-called advanced societies, and how we've gotten away from that, and we've been fighting to straighten the rivers instead of letting the rivers meander and do what it does best, because it has that wisdom, it has that thousands and thousands of years of knowledge and understanding of the landscapes and what each life force, what each living being needs. And I'm looking at this water out here, and it is man-made. You know, it's able to do its thing, and animals are able to come here and find food and shelter and the things that it needs, but it still lacks in a lot of that understanding that we don't have to constantly be trying to straighten the river in order for anything to make sense to us. I feel like we're trying to manipulate and control too many things, and it's only causing more and more damage. And I feel like the more we try to straighten and control ourselves and other living beings, you know, our children, the next generations, it's causing so many problems within our understanding. Because deep down inside of us, we have a different kind of an understanding of how things are supposed to be. It's left to do what it does best, what Mother Earth does best, and also with our care and support and some management. You know, we are a part of that system. We are nature as well, but it doesn't mean that we have to control everything. We're not meant to straighten the river, and we're not meant to dig everything out and make it into our own image or what we believe that is our image, because that's not what our image is, because we believe ourselves to be separate or above nature, and that's completely where we've gone wrong. And I think that it's important for us to remember that, and however we can remember that. And I don't know what to say to people who are so cut off from their roots, so cut off from their understanding of who they were. And I don't mean like Black and Indigenous people. I mean like people who have been hundreds and thousands of years even from who they were as people who lived upon the earth in a good way, the way they see that we do. When they're talking about Indigenous people and how we lived in such a way with the earth in a balance, you know, and we're still struggling to do that. But we're very much on the cusp as well, where we can choose to turn and walk away from that as well. We have to be very careful. And I think that people say that, like Russell Means said, that white folks are the next Indians. What happened to the natives is going to happen to the settlers, but really what happened to the settlers can also happen to us. And we are on that cusp right now where we need to make that decision of how much do we assimilate, how much do we let go of who we are. You know, I think in that way there is no separation. You know, we are all humans and we are all capable of making the right decisions. And I think we spend enough time in areas that are more natural. I'm not saying that a lot of places have been reforested. They have been managed to a point of, I guess managed too much, you know, controlled. So it's kind of hard. And even when I was sitting in Skidaway and I looked at some of the history on the plaques, and I never knew that whole place was completely cleared. And all of those trees and that growth there was not that old, like what, 100, 150 years old. So what I was actually looking at was a man-made forest. I mean, they completely destroyed the whole forest and managed it in a different kind of a way. And it looks wild, but it really isn't, because we think that we have to constantly go in and control everything for whatever it is we needed. At that time, I think it was for food and war and other different things, you know. So, you know, we really don't even know what we're looking at sometimes. What we think of as wild, like that tree over there, growing in a way that doesn't look like anybody's been pruning it and trimming it. It's actually not even been here that long. It's because somebody knocked all these things down and created this waterway and tailored this park the way they think it should look for aesthetics. You know, this is a beautiful place, but it's not beautiful in the way that it was intended when it was created. I don't even know what was here before, but yes, it's a nice place to come and visit and get away from this life that we've created, which is another issue. You know, we're constantly living a life that we feel we have to make other places to get away from that. And that's not what it means to be part of all of this. And as indigenous people, we live our life in a way that you don't want to escape your life. That is our life, and people don't understand that. You know, it's not get up and go fight the pipeline. You know, it's not okay and then go back to whatever it is you were doing before. It's be about protecting that land, and like be about what it is, because it's not just detrimental to your way of life, it's detrimental to all of your life.
Well, that's it for this month. Kanapaha, Yalpin, and Buna, an eco-cultural concept. Which way, Savannah? Thank you for joining us, and please join us again for our revolution and liberation ceremonies. Peace and freedom is the heart to make revolution.
Cries and the anger. Been here as long as I can remember, fighting, sniping, turning our backs on love every day. But there's a method to this madness, a scientific feature, future sadness, a way to steal the gold, take the bones of the young and old, anything can be sold. Like ships loaded with cargo, such our lives ready with far to go, yet we are casting the play like slaves, afraid to catch a freedom train. And who finally sits at the top, checking the clock, where the buck stops and drops in the pocket of he who exploits our rage. Every day, the further down we go, the higher we climb. The further up we go, the higher we climb. Propelled by slave ship history, manifest destiny. Rocket fuel. But let's stop the cycle of abuse. Come on now, let's translate our rage into something we can use. Let's turn the tide of this fifth of you nightmare upside down. Can you hear me?